In today's daily news, I really want to take some time and speak about an issue that has been very, very relevant, and it has been playing heavily on my mind. And in this presentation, I'm going to get real deep down and personal, simply because the topic that I will be talking about is a personal one. You've heard in my previous video just a light mention of mental health, and mental health being a serious thing. There are persons, when they hear mental and health, they think mad. But I'm here to tell you that mental health does not mean you're mad. It means your mental state of mind is not as it should be. And if we think of health of any other part of the body, it does not bring up any connotation of the individual being now useless. So why should mental health be considered as such? We're talking about depression. Depression is mental health. Depression comes from an imbalance in the thought processes. And no, I'm not going to be getting clinical. This is still a travel forum. This is still talking about travel. But, you know, the last video, we spoke about the death of a crew member who went overboard. And in this particular presentation, we're going to be talking about the death of another crew member. And even before we get to that story, there is a report that I followed yesterday, Sunday, about a Jamaican musician who is at sea just off the coast of Miami. And he is going through a rough time. Yesterday, May 10th, my apologies, being Mother's Day, was not a good time for him, as he shared the report with a Jamaican newspaper, because he was having a serious challenge with being isolated in his cabin, knowing that Mother's Day, his two daughters, a little baby, 2 years old, and a 7-year-old child, who continues to ask, Mommy, when is Daddy coming home? Mommy, is this month end? Is this when Daddy is coming home? And the mother not being able to provide any reassurance as to the actual time when Daddy will be home. The father is very distraught because he suddenly finds himself in a place where he has no timeline to return home to his family. And this is weighing him down. He cannot imagine what it's going to be like spending Mother's Day away from his family. In my mind, Mother's Day is a big deal in his family. And the thought that he's not going to be able to share this special time with his daughters, with his wife, with his family, in his home, is weighing him down heavily. There are many persons who will have so much to say. Mental health is so misunderstood. And even in children, there are persons who would want to say, particularly Jamaicans who take things sometimes very, very lightly. Oh, why would a young child have mental health issues? Why would the child be sad? Why would the child be going through depression? Why would the child feel lonely? All of these different emotions that clinically can be diagnosed as to the reason why a child might be acting up. It is clear, if your mental situation is not the way it ought to be, mental health issues can arise. And as I get very passionate about this, I'm talking about the story that I am reviewing now in Cruise Center, a online publication, and it speaks of an Hungarian crew member who committed suicide. Guys, every time I hear that somebody has been, for want of a better term, successful at suicide, I cringe. I cringe because it impacts me on a very personal level. And I'm going to be bearing my all here. At 10 years old, I attempted suicide and I failed. And I have attempted suicide several other times in my life. My last attempt, my last real attempt, was foolproof. And one day, maybe, on a forum that is conducive to this type of conversation, I'll go in depth as to how that plan was foiled. And I know that was divine intervention. I was a young lady, 20, maybe 21. But in my mind, I could not move any further. There was no way forward. I was stuck. I wanted to end it all. I needed to end it all. But as I look further down the road, here I am, more than 20 odd years later, and so much has happened in my life. My life has been rich. My life has had its ups and downs, but I have touched so many lives. There's so many people whose lives are better because I stuck around, because I was forced to stick around. And I want us to talk about mental health. I want to flesh out my own story. I want to speak about a student of mine who, to this day, no one can put their finger on it as to why he committed suicide. I cringe because I wish my story was out in the public domain a little earlier. Maybe it could have stopped a life from thinking there is no light at the end of the tunnel. But as we go through, I'll share this story with you about this young man from Hungary and try to, in my own mind, if not on this presentation, try to imagine the circumstances that led to it. Now, the story tells this way. A team member on Carnival Cruise Line reportedly took his own life today during his final voyage before repatriation back to his home country. And this is sad, he's on his way home. I don't know. I don't even want to go through all the thoughts that I'm discussing with myself. No, I'm not mad. They say that the first sign of madness is talking to yourself, or better still, when you talk to yourself and then you answer self. But we're not making light of this. But I've been talking to myself about it, and it has disturbed me a great deal. He was on his way home, the last trip, allegedly, that they would be making as they make their way home. And I'm going to spend some time and go through the story simply to form a basis for the frustration that probably would have overwhelmed him. And a lot of times, too, we have to remember that based on your circumstances, based on the level of hardship that you are accustomed to facing in your life, based on the way you handle problems, you will respond differently. There are some persons who, for want of a better word, and this is not a clinical term at all, some people, their minds are very light. Them can't take problem. And when problems come, they don't know how to handle it. You see, school is not a place where we're taught coping strategies. We're taught all of this academia, things that somebody assume will be necessary to get us through life. But the real skills that need to be embraced, the real things that we're going to face as young adults going into the work world, those aren't taught in school. I wonder why. But we'd love to talk about those in another forum. It says that the 29-year-old crew member from Hungary was found dead in his cabin on the cruise ship Carnival Breeze. He had been working as a shore excursion assistant manager for Carnival for the past 3 years. Now, I don't know if he loved his job, but he was doing it for 3 years, which suggests he was now on his third contract. And as a shore excursion assistant manager, I would want to think he had a pretty good job, a fun job. For me, I love excursions, and maybe that is why I'm like, huh, this guy has a job that most other crew members, like waiters and bartenders, might be envious of. You know, when you work with the shore excursion desk, you have privileges. You get to go on the excursions. You get to go off the ship. You get to meet the nationals in so many different countries. You get to have a very full and robust experience. Now, there's some who, will probably just be at the desk and would sell, and I would imagine that you have that option. But personally, I believe that if you are in Shorex any at all, you have such a wonderful opportunity to be going off the ship, to be seeing places, and the Carnival Breeze in particular. I know this itinerary, and mark you, we'll probably learn as we go further down in the article that he was not necessarily assigned to the Breeze, but being with Carnival, and Carnival is the fun ship. You'd have a whole lot of fun. But of course, I'm interjecting again to say, don't look on things on the outside as it seems. Because I remember working as an entertainment coordinator, and persons would say, oh, this is the funnest job around. I mean, you could never have a dull moment. But at that point, that was where I sank deepest because it's like an adrenaline rush. You are on stage, lights, camera, action. You are performing, you're smiling, you're doing your thing, and the world is happy. Your guests are elated at the production that you're rolling out. But in all honesty, when the lights go down and when you take that lonely stroll back to your cabin, you are left with all your own fears and anxiety. And nobody sees that because you pour so much out as you give to the role that you are currently operating in, that when you pull back into yourself, nobody really sees the pain and the anguish that might be sitting there. So I continue. It is said that this tragic event was reported by several crew members on board who were shocked because everything seemed to be normal with their fellow crew member. One crew member said his sail and sign in card was checked and was last used on Wednesday. That was the last time he was seen, and that somebody talked with him and he seemed to be normal, just a regular quarantine type conversations. Hungarian crew member on the breeze unfortunately committed suicide. That was the report that came to them. And along with that was the statement that depression is striking hard to us on board after a long period of isolation on the ships. And this is what another crew member said. And I tell you, isolation, I'm really beginning to understand how horrible isolation is and can be. It goes on to say, according to a message we received from a crew member, an announcement was made on board Carnival Breeze by the captain, confirming the sad news. People are in a bad mood, which is normal, but still we're trying to be positive and look forward to going home. Also, they said that they were informed that the family, which was the most important, and the company is providing care for crew through hotline and on board with HRD. And the captain just said on the PA system, they should take advantage of it. It's just painful. Another crew member on Carnival Breeze expressed her unhappiness regarding the lack of communication and all the transfers and delays during the final repatriation process. I'm currently on Carnival Breeze, she says. Originally, she was assigned on the Dream, and it was decided on April 17th to send us on a bus trip from Galveston to Port Canaveral. And, there's so many things going on. And we come back to the CDC indicating how cruise lines must transit and get their crew home. The no connecting flight, charter flights only, all of that. So it has really made life a living hell for these persons who all they were doing was etching out a life for themselves. So now you cannot fly them from Galveston to the East Coast to pick up whatever transportation is going to take them on to Europe. So in this particular situation, they were transported by bus from Galveston to Port Canaveral, and that was a 32-hour long process. And the conditions were not great. And I can tell you, I've used a Greyhound in the States. I've traveled by Renfe in Spain, and a long ride is a long ride. After a while, you wonder, are we there yet? It would have to be a luxury transportation. I mean, I'm thinking that if I was on the California Zephyr with Amtrak vacations, with my sleeper cabin and my gourmet dining options, then that ride might not be so bad. And I'm looking at the wonderful vistas I'm passing through, wonderful, landmarks, then that might not be so bad. But in a typical bus, like a Greyhound or so, a coach type 54-seater bus where you are without much leg room, your space is cramped, the stops are not frequent, you're not getting the chance to overnight in a nice bed, you're not able to shower and change and just refresh yourself, because these are some of the stipulations that were facing these crew members as well. They can't stop in a hotel, they can't freshen up. They probably have to stop at a park and stop sort of thing, use the restroom there, but it's just not the same. So they had this 32-hour long process, and upon arriving at Port Canaveral, they embarked the Carnival Magic. It was while there they found out that on May 2 they will have to move by tender to the breeze. Personally, I don't like tendering. I don't think anybody likes tendering. And so they were tendered from the Magic to the breeze. Then they go on to say that they're not really getting a lot of help since the team member hung himself. And human resources is not saying anything. Nothing is being said. They really just feel alone. And they're living in the dark. That was her words. She says, and she's from Hungary, so you can imagine it really hits home. She says there's no information as to when we're going to get to the UK and how we're going to proceed from there to our homes. And, once you've hit the UK, you really just started the journey. Because even if Carnival uses a vessel to ferry them into the UK, for the landlocked countries, then because no flights can be used again, I'm just really, oh, I won't even state my idea of this thing, but it's really depressing. They really don't know how they're gonna get home. It's just rough. It's sad. It's hard. It says further that there's a possibility that we might have to transfer back to Carnival Magic and proceed to Greece to get home. This has been a month of horrible decisions and a lack of communication from Carnival. The effects, even maybe for people who live on land, doesn't look too devastating. But for us, this life is not easy. Coming across and listening to people commenting on how we should be thankful, it's just irritating. That's what she's saying. Because if you haven't been on board, you will never understand. The report goes on to say that Carnival Breeze, together with Carnival Magic, are on a mission to return European crew members back home The two ships are currently sailing across the Atlantic Ocean and are scheduled to arrive in Europe in the following days in order to repatriate crew members. But the loss of a friend and a colleague is a very difficult and extremely difficult experience, as the young lady continues to say. And we are all affected by this terrible tragedy, especially knowing that the crew member was only days away from reuniting with his family and loved ones. And so they close the article by saying, "Rest in peace, mate, and may our deepest condolences go to your family and friends." Ah, I feel this one, feel it on a personal level. Wow. This is how the news unfolded this morning on the Daily News.